Donald Trump earlier in the week lashing out effectively at his own base, calling his supporters weaklings, saying that he didn't actually need their support. They were former supporters because they were going against him.
And Katy Balls joins me now. Morning, Katy.
Morning.
Just bring us up to speed with the latest on this story, because Donald Trump has been really angry about this, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think the first thing to note is just how long this story has been dragging on, much to Donald Trump's annoyance. Of course, there's been stories involving Jeffrey Epstein, questions for Donald Trump for some time, but this was all brought back to the surface, to the top of the news agenda about 2 weeks ago, when the Department of Justice and FBI released a memo effectively saying Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide and there was no client list. Now, the client list has long been talked about in Make America Great Again circles as something that they wanted to be released and would happen if Donald Trump was back in the White House. And therefore, the president has faced anger from his own side at the fact that this hasn't happened, complaints from the base about a lack of transparency. But the story has taken on new momentum as the Democrats have also spied a political opportunity. And then you've had a situation whereby the Wall Street Journal has had a story come out, one that Trump denies and is now suing the paper about, alleging that Donald Trump wrote a lewd birthday message for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday. And then on Friday, we had one more development in this sense that they're now asking Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, if they can release the grand testimony and so forth from the Epstein case. So that is something that is in motion, but we're yet to hear whether a judge is willing to do that.
And do you think all of that context and the reaction from his own MAGA base is the reason why Donald Trump reacted so strongly to the story in the Wall Street Journal about him writing this personal message? Because, you know, he's threatened to sue. He's been very, very cross about it on social media. Do you think that's what's behind that new pursuit of legal proceedings?
Well, I think Donald Trump is very annoyed in general that this story is still going in terms of the wider story. And therefore, the Wall Street Journal story, which is specifically about Donald Trump, which makes life more difficult for him, is going to further antagonize that situation. Now, so I can fly. Okay, it's going to further antagonize. I think, therefore, the Wall Street Journal story is going to further antagonize the situation, and clearly the president has made clear his displeasure, but there are already signs that he was growing pretty exasperated with the whole situation. The fact that you had Donald Trump earlier in the week lashing out effectively at his own base, calling his supporters weaklings, saying that he didn't actually need their support, they were former supporters because they were going against him. I think that it does show that of all the rows that have been for Donald Trump since he returned to the White House, this one does seem to be causing him the most personal pain on a few different levels.
And it comes at a time when he is, he's got a couple of domestic issues on the go as well. There are questions about the economy. There's questions about his control over the direction of travel when it comes to the economy. I mean, he's coming over to the UK this week. Will that be a welcome break, do you think?
I think it probably is going to be a welcome break, just in the sense that Donald Trump loves golf. He loves his businesses, and you look at the trip that he's planning, and it ticks all those boxes. I think this is something that he actively wants to do, and therefore the White House will be looking forward to it. Now, Donald Trump on the economy and others will tell you that he is winning, that America has never been hotter, it's the hottest country in the world. So there's no public admission really that there are issues on the domestic front. I think that in the White House too, they do feel as though they've hit their stride in some ways, but there are tricky questions looming on tariffs when you look at inflation and so forth. But I think the story that really he wants to get away from right now is Epstein, and what's going to decide that is will the courts go along with the efforts by the administration to release files, and if they don't, does he start to have an internal problem again with his core supporters?
You mentioned Donald Trump loves golf. He's obviously coming over to this country to visit one of his own golf courses, but he is meeting Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, while he's here. It's not a formal state visit. Just explain to people what is the capacity that he's coming in, and what could we expect from that meeting with the Prime Minister?
He's coming partly for his own business interests, which I think might sound slightly strange to a UK audience when we think about what would happen if Keir Starmer was just popping over to America to, in the equivalent, say he had a bunch of golf clubs or so forth. Hard to imagine. But he is primarily there for personal reasons, but is bringing a traveling US press pack. The two things do combine. And we know there are plans for a meeting with Keir Starmer in Scotland. That would be a closed meeting. But on the agenda is the UK-US trade deal and how you can further work to improve that for both sides. So there's a question as what asks might Donald Trump have when it comes to that trade deal. We know that it, has reached a point where, initially it was much more not hypothetical, but it wasn't quite as thrashed out when it was first announced, despite the fact that both sides really wanted to play into it. But there are lots of things that Donald Trump would obviously like more from the UK when you look at tech, when you look at some of the taxes and so forth. So is this going to be an opportunity to press the UK further? Generally speaking, though, we know that Donald Trump is an Anglophile. He likes coming to the UK. And I think that this is the mood in Washington, at least, is this is a trip that he feels quite positive about, and that could bode well potentially for Keir Starmer.
But there is a small row brewing, or it's not that small, I suppose, from the UK side, over access to data with Apple. The UK government, the Home Office, is seeking more access to some of that background information, particularly when it comes to terrorism cases. It's something that JD Vance, I think, has been quite vocal about. He thinks that that is unacceptable. Is that likely to come up between the two men?
I think there's obviously potential for that to come up. If you have a private meeting, I mean, what is going to be on the agenda will be at the call, likely led by the president rather than the prime minister. But we know that this administration is quite happy to raise issues both privately and publicly with the UK. We also know, for example, JD Vance is quite happy to publicly speak about freedom of speech issues within the UK. And it does mean the potential, given that America and this Trump administration likes to cast itself as a caring friend that's a bit worried about Britain right now. It does mean there are a whole range of topics that could come up which have the potential to be quite uncomfortable for the Prime Minister. The question is, how much do they affect live policy decisions and negotiations, and how much is it just a mild ticking off? But time and time again, Donald Trump, I think, has surprised the pundits by actually being a lot warmer to Keir Starmer than the initial predictions were when you think about their difference in politics, when you think about the past comments. And that has been the main theme so far, which is actually a fairly rosy relationship between the two of them, at least, even if they disagree in some parts. And of course, JD Vance has been more critical in some ways, but he won't be in this meeting specifically, even if we do hear he's thinking about holidaying in the Cotswolds in a few weeks' time.
Katie, thanks very much.
Thanks.